The end of the Marvel Snap season is almost here, and it's time to finish up those infinite climbs and claim those infinity border avatars inside of Conquest. Today's video is going to run you through the most popular decks on untap.gg, so you know what to expect when you're heading into battle. I'm going to talk through some of the top performing decks on Untapped, and I'm going to give you a couple of my personal favorite pocket picks that I think are excellent into all of the above. Let's jump to it. Our first and most popular deck, according to Untap.gg, has not been demised with the release of Mobius and Mobius. The Wave High Evolutionary Hulk deck is as powerful as ever. When your opponent doesn't have their own Mobius and Mobius, we can play ours alongside Wave and lock them out of that turn 6. We get to play multiple cards while they get to play just one. When your opponent does have their own Mobius, this deck is still just playing a bunch of incredibly potent on-rate cards. My number one tip when you're playing into opposing Mobius decks is don't feel obligated to save your wave till turn 5 when your opponent could be flipping up their tech card in Mobius to get you. If you wave on turn 4, this lets you deploy a 6-drop for 4 energy on turn 5, meaning you get to have that leftover energy to trigger Misty Knight, Cyclops, and High Evolutionary Hulk to get their abilities going, and then you can follow up that big play that you made on turn 5 with an additional big play on turn 6, which is why you see 3 different 6 energy plays here in Hulk, America Chavez, and Dr. Doom. Our next most popular deck, according to Untap.gg, is the Iron Patriot deck. This deck has a lot of powerful things going on. Let's break it down. To start with, Forge's +3 gets distributed across multiple bodies thanks to Mr. Sinister and Brood, and then we can follow up either of those cards with Absorbing Man to make that +3 go even further. In addition to going wide with a bunch of bodies in single locations, this deck can also go very tall in those spots as well, thanks to Iron Man doubling up our stats. The big thing that stands out about this deck in the metagame to me is that it is neither a Mobius or Wave deck, while simultaneously playing well into both of those cards. We're not cheating on cost, so Mobius doesn't really impact us, and should our opponent wave us going into the final turn, we have Alioth, Dr. Doom, and America Chavez as all powerful big plays we can make while normally being restricted. Probably the biggest strength this deck brings to the board is how much it leaves the opponents guessing on your final turn. Are you going to slam an Alioth? Are you going to slam a Dr. Doom? Are you going to play Patriot plus Surfer to pump up your board that you already have? Often, your opponent is going to choose wrong, and you are going to crush them with the element of surprise. Up next, we have the Craven Movers deck that continues to adapt and be powerful in the metagame. I really like this particular variation that I've highlighted on your screen because it's choosing to leverage cards like Nightcrawler, Jeff, Vision, and even Iron Lad to copy those movement effects to really leave your opponent guessing where your power is going to end up at the end of the game. Similar to the Iron Patriot deck, this deck also packing multiple powerful top-end 6-drops in Alioth and Dr. Doom, so they really don't know where you're going to be playing to and how much. It is noteworthy that there's other variations of this deck that are still playing things like Wave or Kitty Pryde or Angela that are seeing success, but these current 12 cards are definitely my personal favorite. At this point, Shuri really feels like one of Marvel Snap's old faithfuls. You play Shuri on 4, you play Red Skull on 5 for 28 points worth of stats, you play a Taskmaster copying it to follow up, and a lot of decks are just going to have a hard time keeping up if they don't have the exact right tech cards to interact with you. One thing that is noteworthy is that after the latest set of OTA changes, this Sauron version of Shuri is the determined best one. Previously, variations leveraging Kitty Pryde with Forge and Hulkbuster have been running around in the wild, but with Kitty losing 2 points of power, the stats on that build have fallen off completely. One thing that stands out in my mind as being excellent about the Sauron build is it gets to leverage Enchantress as a tech card, which not only shuts off our own detrimental ongoing effects on cards like Red Skull and Typhoid Mary, but it also acts as an interactive piece against decks like the Patriot deck that we highlighted earlier that are looking to leverage ongoing cards to great effect. Moving along from the most popular decks to decks that are lesser played but have incredible performance rates, we have the Galactus control deck that's card for card what was being played before Galactus was nerfed to 5 points of power. This deck list still has a solid win rate inside of Conquest and a good win and cube rate on the ladder. That being said, its play rate has fallen off a cliff because, as Second Dinner has acknowledged in the past, whenever they change a card in a detrimental manner, people just stop playing decks that that card was in, despite them still often performing well. The true strength of this deck is the fact that it's not just a dedicated Galactus deck. Sure, sometimes you go Electro into Hobgoblin, into Galactus, into Alioth, and win the game deterministically, but a lot of the time you're leveraging things like Nebula and Sunspot and Daredevil to lock out a path with Professor X and then win a second path with either a big fish like Orca, or a purple fart like Alioth, or a tech card like Shang-Chi. Our next deck list features one of Marvel Snap's other big bads in Thanos that has largely been written off by a lot of creators after the Soul Stone lost its draw. However, this particular controlling deck list with the addition of Alioth has been quietly putting up very impressive metrics on the Marvel Snap post-Infinite ladder. Good tech cards like Cosmo and Shang-Chi in conjunction with powerful prison elements in Professor X and Alioth really gives your opponents a run for their money. Our final low play rate but high performing deck is a personal favorite of mine, and that is Cerebro 5. I was actually a little surprised to see this deck still having such strong metrics in a post-Mobius world, since it is leaning on Wave as a form of acceleration and disruption. But I think a big part of this deck list's success is definitely based on the fact that it gets to leverage Enchantress as a potent tech card. There are a number of decks, such as the Patriot deck, that are leaning on key ongoing effects, and Enchantress can not only shut off things like Iron Man, but it can also wipe your opponent's Mobius effect off the board before you wave them on turn 5, heading into that important final turn of the game. This deck, similar to others that we've seen today, is leveraging Alioth as well as Doctor Doom as this really potent 1-2 punch that makes it so your opponent can't ever play around both and is often left guessing at what you're going to do. Moving along to my personal pocket picks into this metagame, the first deck list I'd like to recommend is this Destroy Double Up deck list that I featured in a deck highlight on the channel earlier this week. I personally use this deck list to climb from about rank 2000 to sub 1500 while climbing inside of Infinite. This deck has a small Destroy sub package, putting stats into play early thanks to things like Bucky and Deathlock, and it combines that with Moon Girl copying high stat, low energy cards like Hood's Demon or Titania, so we can play them out in a big flurry on the final turn of the game, while Mobius and Mobius make sure that no pesky waves can stop any of that from happening. Juggernaut is definitely a key tech card to highlight here as well. Being just 3 energy, he can often lock up one lane on the final turn while we deploy a bunch of high stat 1 energy cards to another, clinching key victories. For my second pocket pick and my final deck recommendation today, I have this Loki Surfer variation. I wasn't planning to try and climb high on the post-Infinite ladder this first season, but as I was working and playing and having fun with this deck, I found myself under rank 1000 as we just kept winning match after match and cube after cube. I took it into an Infinity Conquest and cleaned up a new Infinity border for my Darkhawk avatar as well. This deck just hits on lots of different axes that are difficult for the opponents to keep up with. Sometimes you're this Forge into Brood deck in tandem with Silver Surfer and other disruptive 3-drops like Rogue, Cosmo, and Killmonger to stop your opponent's game plan dead in its tracks. Other times you're playing Snow Guard into the Collector into Loki, and suddenly you have this massive 2 energy play and a bunch of your opponent's cards at a cheaper rate than they can keep up with. Hopefully today's video has given you some deck list ideas to help you achieve your Marvel Snap goals for the season. As a part of this sign off, I would like to remind everyone to just make sure you're having fun as well. I know competing can be a goal for many, but if at any point your frustrations are sucking the joy out of the game that you're playing, take a deep breath, take a break, consider playing in a different manner. Marvel Snap is something that you should play for fun. Have fun out there, gamers. Until next time.